He spent my birthday with his ex. I said nothing, just made sure he saw me leave forever. My husband came home at 7 in the morning, the day after my birthday. I heard his keys hit the table in the entryway, that familiar metallic clink that usually meant everything was normal. Except nothing about this was normal. I was sitting at the kitchen table. The coffee in my mug had gone cold hours ago. I hadn't moved since midnight, hadn't slept, hadn't done anything except watch the clock and wonder where my husband was on what should have been my night. When Grant walked into the kitchen, he looked tired. But he didn't look guilty. That's what hit me first. No shame in his expression, no rushed apologies tumbling out of his mouth. Just this casual exhaustion, like he'd been up late finishing a project instead of spending the night at his ex-girlfriend's apartment. She was having a crisis, he said before I could even ask. Vanessa called around 8, totally falling apart. What was I supposed to do, just ignore her? I didn't say anything. I just looked at him, this man I'd been married to for 3 years, this person I thought I knew. Babe, come on. His voice shifted into that soothing tone he used when he wanted to smooth things over. Her mom just got diagnosed with cancer. She needed someone to talk to. I couldn't just leave her like that. I was 28 years old. In 3 years of marriage, I'd learned to tell the difference between the truth and a performance. This was definitely a performance. I called you, I said quietly. 7 times. My phone was on silent. I didn't see them until this morning. He shrugged, like missing my birthday was just an unfortunate inconvenience rather than the worst thing he'd done to me yet. Something settled inside me in that moment. Not a dramatic snap, not some explosion of rage. Just this quiet, heavy understanding. I thought about all the times I'd made excuses for him, all the moments I'd swallowed my hurt because confronting him felt harder than just letting it go. I looked down at my left hand. The engagement ring and wedding band sat there, white gold with a small diamond I'd loved so much when he proposed. I remembered how excited I'd been, how certain I was that I'd found my person. Without saying a word, I pulled both rings off and set them on the kitchen table. They made a soft clicking sound against the wood. Grant's voice cut off mid-sentence when he noticed. I watched his face change, confusion first, then something that might have been actual concern. What are you doing? I stood up. My legs felt steady even though my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I walked past him toward the hallway, close enough to catch a whiff of perfume on his shirt. Perfume I didn't wear. Marin, what is this? His voice had that edge of panic now. Talk to me. The silence I gave him was the realest thing I'd said all morning. I hadn't always been this quiet. Before Grant, I'd been the loud one at parties, the one with opinions about everything, the friend who always made people laugh. Somewhere in the last 3 years, that version of me had gotten smaller and smaller until I barely recognized her anymore. Now I was in our bedroom, pulling clothes out of the closet and packing them into a suitcase, while Grant followed me around demanding explanations I didn't owe him. At least talk to me, he kept saying. This isn't how marriage works. I paused at the dresser and finally looked at him. Really looked at him. You spent my birthday with your ex-girlfriend. That's not how marriage works either. His mouth opened, then closed. For once, he didn't have a response ready. I went back to packing. And while I folded my clothes and decided what to take and what to leave behind, I started thinking about when this had really begun. When had I started shrinking myself to fit his expectations? When had I stopped being Marin and started being whoever Grant needed me to be? Maybe it started about 8 months into our relationship, when Grant first told me about Vanessa. They dated for 5 years, he'd explained. High school sweethearts who'd stayed together through college. The kind of relationship that shapes who you become as a person. We're still friends, he'd said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Mature adults can be friends with their exes, right? I'd smiled and agreed because I wanted to be mature. I wanted to be the cool girlfriend who wasn't threatened by the past. Looking back now, I could see all the warning signs I'd ignored. Grant's phone buzzing late at night with texts he'd angle away from me. Casual mentions of grabbing coffee with Vanessa slipped into conversation so smoothly that questioning it made me feel crazy. The time I found a hair tie in his car, not mine, the wrong color, and he'd laughed it off. Must have been there from before we started dating. I'd believed him because believing him was easier than facing the alternative. I remembered the day he proposed. It was at his parents' house during their annual 4th of July barbecue. He got down on one knee in front of everyone, and his whole family cheered. I'd felt so happy, so chosen, so lucky. Later that night, scrolling through Instagram, I'd seen Vanessa had commented on the photos his sister posted. Gorgeous ring. He always had excellent taste. Just 5 words. Nothing overtly inappropriate. But they'd lodged in my chest like a splinter. Why is your ex commenting on our engagement photos? I'd asked him that night. Grant had barely looked up from his phone. We're friends, March. What's the big deal? I'd let it go. I'd let so many things go. My mom had noticed something was wrong. Mothers always do. During visits home, she'd study my face with that worried expression I knew too well. You look tired, honey. Is everything okay with Grant? I'd smile and lie and say everything was perfect because admitting the truth felt like admitting I'd made a mistake. I'd chosen Grant. I'd said yes. To admit I'd been wrong meant admitting I'd wasted years on someone who was never fully mine. Now, packing my suitcase while Grant paced behind me, I realized I'd been lying to myself even more than I'd been lying to my mom. At least tell me where you're going, Grant said. He sounded more annoyed than worried. Away from you. Maren, this is ridiculous. So I made a mistake, okay? I should have texted you or something. But you're acting like I cheated on you. Vanessa needed help. I was being a good friend. I zipped up the suitcase and turned to face him. Do you even remember what yesterday was? Of course I do. It was your birthday. And I feel terrible about missing it, but this was an emergency. Was it an emergency? Really? I picked up my suitcase. Or was it just more important than me? Something flickered across his face. For a second, I thought he might actually tell me the truth. But then his expression settled back into that defensive mask I'd seen so many times before. You know what? I'm not doing this right now. You're being completely unreasonable. He walked out of the bedroom, and I heard him go into his office down the hall. I should have left right then. Should have walked out the door and never looked back. But something made me pause. Some instinct I'd been ignoring for 3 years suddenly screamed at me to pay attention. I walked down the hall to Grant's office. The door was open. His laptop sat on the desk, screen still glowing. He wasn't in the room. I could hear him in the kitchen, probably stress eating like he always did when he was upset. I'd never snooped through Grant's things before. Trust was supposed to be the foundation of marriage. At least, that's what I'd always told myself. What a convenient belief that had been. My hands moved almost on autopilot. I sat down at his desk and woke up his laptop screen. His messages app was open, it synced with his phone through some work platform. I'd noticed it once months ago, when a text from Mom had popped up on the screen while we were watching a movie. I clicked on the message thread labeled, Mom Now. The first message I saw made my stomach drop. Last night was perfect. I missed you so much. I scrolled up. The messages went back weeks. Months. Maybe longer. I'll tell her it's a work thing. She won't question it. Does she know about us? Mar is clueless. She always has been. That one stopped me cold. Mar is clueless. She always has been. Grant's words. About me. To the woman who'd stolen my birthday. My hands were shaking, but I kept scrolling. The messages told a story I'd been too trusting to see. Anniversary dinners I thought Grant had planned for me. He'd been texting Vanessa the same day, making plans to see her after. Business trips I'd never questioned, there were photos attached. Hotel rooms. Vanessa's face in the frame, Grant's arm around her shoulders. My birthday wasn't even the first time he'd spent the night at her place. According to the messages, it was at least the 8th. Can't wait to see you tonight. Mar thinks I'm at Kevin's watching the game. You really think she believes all this? She wants to believe me. That's the thing about her, makes it easy. I found messages from our wedding day. Our wedding day. She looks so happy. Feel kind of guilty, honestly. You always feel guilty at first. Then you get over it. Grant had been texting Vanessa during our wedding reception. The call I'd seen him take in the parking lot, the one he'd said was about work, it wasn't work. It was her. It had always been her. I sat back in the chair, hands trembling, stomach churning. 3 years. 3 years of marriage, and every single day had been a lie. Every I love you, every anniversary, every moment I'd thought we were building a life together, he'd been living a completely different reality. I heard his footsteps in the hallway. Quickly, I closed the laptop and grabbed my suitcase from where I'd left it by the office door. You're really doing this? Grant stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Walking out without even giving me a chance to explain? I looked at him one last time. This man I'd loved, this man I'd trusted with everything. There's nothing left to explain. I walked past him, through the apartment we'd chosen together, past the furniture we'd picked out, the photos on the walls of a marriage that had never actually existed. Marin. His voice followed me down the hallway. Marin, come on. You're being crazy. I didn't respond. I just kept walking until I reached my car, threw my suitcase in the back, and drove away. I checked into a hotel that night. Some chain place off the interstate, the kind with thin walls and a vending machine that hummed too loud. It didn't matter. For the first time in years, I didn't have to wonder where Grant was or what lie he'd tell when he got home. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. Text after text from Grant. Babe, please. Can we just talk about this? You're overreacting. This is insane. Fine, I messed up. I should have come home. But you're being dramatic. I can't believe you're throwing away our marriage over one mistake. I turned my phone face down on the nightstand and stared at the ceiling. One mistake. He thought this was about one mistake. He had no idea what I'd found. He had no idea that I knew everything. The next morning, I drove to my mom's house. She lived about 40 minutes away, in the same house I'd grown up in. When she opened the door and saw my face, she didn't even ask questions. She just pulled me inside and held me while I cried. Later, sitting at her kitchen table with tea I wasn't drinking, I told her everything. The birthday. The messages. The 3 years of lies. My mom listened without interrupting. When I finished, she reached across the table and took my hands in hers. I knew something was wrong, she said quietly. Every time you came to visit, you seemed smaller somehow. Like you were disappearing a little more each time. But I didn't know how to help you. I wasn't ready to admit it to myself, I said. I thought if I just tried harder, if I was better somehow, he'd finally choose me. Oh honey. My mom's eyes filled with tears. You were always enough. He was just too broken to see it. I stayed at my mom's house that night, and the next night, and the night after that. Grant's texts kept coming, cycling through anger and bargaining and fake apologies and back to anger again. I knew the pattern. I'd seen it before, every time he'd messed up and needed to smooth things over. But this time was different. This time, I wasn't going back. On the third day, Grant showed up at my mom's house. I saw his car pull into the driveway and met him on the front porch before he could ring the bell. He was holding flowers, roses, my favorite, with an expression that looked like he'd practiced it in the mirror. Ma, please, he said. Can we talk? About what? About us. About fixing this. He took a step closer. That's what marriage is, right? Working through the hard stuff together. For a second, I felt it. That old pull. The part of me that still remembered the good times, the early days when I'd thought we were building something real. It would be so easy to take the flowers, to let him apologize, to convince myself this time would be different. But then I remembered. Mar is clueless. She always has been. You've been sleeping with Vanessa for our entire marriage, I said flatly. There's no fixing that. Grant's expression flickered. I watched him recalculate, trying to figure out how to spin this. That's not true, Grant said. His voice had that calm, rational tone he used when he was about to gaslight me. I don't know what you think you saw, but you're wrong. I read the messages, Grant. All of them. His face went pale. Then red. Then something between the two. You went through my computer? You were texting her during our wedding reception. He didn't have an answer for that. The roses dangled from his hand, forgotten. Marin, please. His voice softened into that pleading tone that had worked so many times before. Okay, fine. I made mistakes. But you can't tell me our whole marriage was a lie. We had good times. We had real moments. That meant something. Did it mean something when you told her I was clueless? When you laughed about how easy it was to lie to me? Grant flinched. Those messages, you're taking them out of context. Vanessa was she was a mistake. An old habit I couldn't break. But it didn't mean anything. If it didn't mean anything, why did you lie for 3 years? Because I knew you'd react like this. His voice rose. I knew you'd blow everything out of proportion instead of understanding that people are complicated. Relationships are messy. It's not all black and white. There it was. Even now, caught completely red-handed, he was making this my fault. I was overreacting. I was too simple to understand the nuances of adult relationships. He wasn't a liar, he was just complicated, and I was too naive to appreciate it. I want a divorce, I said. The words hung in the air between us. Grant stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. You're not serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. I turned and walked back into my mom's house, closing the door before he could follow. Through the front window, I watched him stand there frozen for a long moment before finally getting back in his car and driving away. My mom appeared beside me. You okay, sweetheart? I will be. Over the next week, I started untangling my life from Grant's. It was harder than I'd expected. 3 years of marriage had woven us together in ways I hadn't fully realized. Joint bank accounts. Shared credit cards. Both our names on the lease for the apartment. I called a divorce attorney my mom's friend had recommended. Her name was Sharon, and she had that sharp no-nonsense energy that made me feel like maybe I wasn't completely drowning. In Sharon's office, I laid out everything. The affair. The messages. The 3 years of deception. Sharon listened calmly, taking notes. When I finished, she looked up at me. Do you still have access to those messages? I nodded. Before I'd left Grant's office that day, I'd screenshotted everything. Hundreds of messages, going back years. I'd sent them all to myself. Good. In Illinois, we're technically a no-fault state for divorce, but infidelity can still factor into asset division and spousal support discussions. Sharon flipped through her notes. You're both on the lease? Yes. We moved in 2 years ago. And your income compared to his? I thought about it. I'd been promoted twice at my marketing job. Grant worked in real estate, good money when the market was hot, but inconsistent. I'd always been the stable earner. I make about 40% more. That's important to note. Now, tell me about your financial situation. Joint accounts, separate accounts. We kept most things separate, but we have one joint account for rent and utilities. Have you looked at that account recently? I shook my head. I trusted him to handle it. We'd each transfer our share every month, and he'd pay the bills from there. Sharon's expression shifted slightly. I'd like you to pull those records. Sometimes when there's an affair, marital funds end up financing it. Hotels, dinners, gifts. That's money that should have stayed in the marriage. That night, I logged into our joint bank account for the first time in months. The transaction history loaded slowly, and as I scrolled through it, my stomach started to sink. Regular withdrawals that didn't match any bills we had. Transfers to an external account I'd never seen before. Restaurant charges in neighborhoods I'd never been to with Grant. A jewelry purchase from 6 months ago, over $700. I didn't own any $700 jewelry. More dinners. More hotels. A weekend trip to Nashville he told me was a real estate conference, but the hotel was a boutique resort with no business discount applied. He'd been funding his entire affair with our money. Money I'd earned and deposited into our joint account, trusting him to use it for our household. My phone buzzed. Grant again. Ma, please. I know I messed up, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Counseling, therapy, anything. Please don't throw away everything we built together. Everything we built. Like he'd built anything at all. Like he'd been a partner instead of a parasite, draining resources to feed his other life. I didn't respond. Instead, I started taking screenshots of every transaction, organizing them by date, cross-referencing them with the messages I'd already saved. By the time I finished, I had 40 pages of documentation. I sent everything to Sharon with a simple message, "Let me know what else you need." Then I sat on my mom's back porch and watched the sun set. The anger I'd felt had transformed into something else, something focused and purposeful. Grant had spent 3 years thinking he'd gotten away with everything because I'd never looked closely enough. Now I was looking. And what I saw was going to cost him. The divorce papers arrived at Grant's apartment 3 weeks later. I knew the exact moment he received them because my phone exploded with messages. "You're making a huge mistake. You're going to regret this. I can't believe you're being this vindictive." Then, 20 minutes later, "Can we please just talk? Face to face." I didn't respond. I'd learned that silence was the only language Grant couldn't manipulate. What I hadn't expected was the counterattack. It started with phone calls to my family. My mom told me Grant had shown up at her office, crying, begging her to talk sense into me. My brother Andrew got a long text about how I was having some kind of breakdown and needed help. Then Grant contacted my workplace. My boss Rachel called me into her office on a Tuesday afternoon. "I got an interesting phone call this morning," she said, gesturing for me to sit down. "Your soon-to-be ex-husband wanted to let us know you've been under extreme stress and your work decisions might be affected by personal problems." I felt heat rush to my face. "He called you here?" He seemed to think he was being helpful. Rachel's expression was unreadable. "Do you want to tell me what's actually going on?" For a moment, I felt that old urge to minimize everything, to protect Grant's image even now. But I was done protecting him. "My husband cheated on me throughout our entire marriage," I said. "I'm divorcing him. He's not handling it well." Rachel's face softened. "I'm sorry you're going through that. And for what it's worth, no phone call from a vindictive ex is going to affect how I view your work. You're one of our best project managers." I called Sharon that afternoon. "He's contacting my family and my job. Is there anything I can do?" "Document everything. If this continues, we can file for a restraining order and add harassment to the divorce proceedings. It won't look good for him in front of a judge." It was during that conversation that Sharon mentioned something that changed everything. "I finished reviewing all the financial documents you sent," she said. "Something interesting came up. The security deposit and first month's rent for your apartment. Where did that money come from?" "My savings account. Grant didn't have much saved at the time, so I covered it. He agreed to pay a larger share of the rent to make up for it." "Is that agreement in writing?" I paused. "We talked about it, but we never put it on paper." "And has he been paying the larger share?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. "No. Actually, we've both been paying exactly half for the past 2 years. He never increased his portion." "So you paid the full deposit, and you've been splitting the rent equally even though you covered the upfront costs." Sharon's voice had that edge of controlled anger that lawyers get when they find something good. "Combined with the evidence of him using marital funds for the affair, we have a strong argument that you should keep the apartment and seek full reimbursement for diverted funds." For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt something like hope. That night, I wrote out everything I wanted from the divorce. The apartment. Reimbursement for the money Grant had stolen. A clean break with no future contact. I wasn't going to be nice about it. I wasn't going to make this easy for him. Grant had treated my trust as a weakness. Now he was going to learn it had been his biggest mistake. The first court date was scheduled for 6 weeks out. In the meantime, Sharon had subpoenaed Grant's financial records, which revealed even more damaging evidence. That external account I'd found transfers to? It was a joint account with Vanessa. Grant had been funneling money there for over a year, money that should have been paying our rent, our utilities, our future. Armed with this evidence, Sharon filed a motion for unequal asset division. Illinois allowed judges to deviate from equal splits in cases of dissipation of marital assets, and Grant's behavior qualified in every possible way. But the legal proceedings were just the beginning. Grant had spent our entire relationship carefully managing his image. To his family, he was the devoted husband. To our friends, he was the fun guy who always picked up the tab. Nobody knew about Vanessa except the people Grant chose to tell. I changed that. I didn't do it maliciously. I simply stopped pretending. When Grant's mother called asking why we were divorcing, I told her the truth. When mutual friends reached out, I explained what really happened. When Grant's sister Amy texted accusing me of abandoning the marriage, I sent her one screenshot. She looks so happy. Feel kind of guilty, honestly. You always feel guilty at first. Then you get over it. Amy didn't respond. But 2 days later, Grant sent me an enraged voicemail. You're telling my family about private things. You're trying to turn everyone against me. This is harassment, Marin. I could sue you for this. I almost laughed. He'd spent 3 years lying to my face, funding an affair with my money, and now he was threatening to sue me for telling the truth. I forwarded the voicemail to Sharon. She added it to our growing file. The court date was now 4 weeks away. In the meantime, Grant's carefully constructed world was starting to crumble. His mother had stopped taking his calls. Several of our mutual friends had quietly unfriended him on social media. And Vanessa, apparently realizing the situation was no longer a secret, had stopped responding to his messages. For the first time in our relationship, Grant was facing real consequences. And I discovered that watching his facade crack was more satisfying than I'd ever imagined. The divorce hearing took place on a cold Thursday morning in March. I wore a navy blue suit, professional, put together, the kind of outfit that said I had my life under control even though my stomach was in knots. Grant arrived with his attorney, a man named Paul something who looked like he specialized in making women sound crazy. I'd done my research. He had a reputation for aggressive tactics and painting scorned wives as emotional and unstable. Sharon had warned me about this. He's going to try to rattle you, she'd said. He's going to imply you're being vindictive, that you're exaggerating, that you're not thinking clearly. Don't take the bait. We have evidence. Let the evidence speak. The hearing started with Paul presenting Grant's case. He painted a picture of a man who'd made a mistake, just one mistake, and a wife who was overreacting and trying to punish him financially out of spite. Mr. Richardson acknowledges that he made an error in judgment, Paul said. He failed to come home on his wife's birthday because he was helping a friend in crisis. Was it poor judgment? Yes. But Mrs. Richardson has used this single incident to justify taking everything in their marriage. I watched Grant sit there looking appropriately remorseful, and something hot and sharp rose in my chest. But Sharon squeezed my hand under the table, and I stayed quiet. Then it was our turn. Sharon presented the financial records first. Every transfer to the joint account with Vanessa. Every hotel charge. Every restaurant bill. Every dollar Grant had diverted from our marriage, laid out in meticulous, undeniable detail. Paul objected repeatedly, but the numbers didn't lie. Then Sharon presented the messages. Not all of them, just the most damaging ones. The ones where Grant called me clueless. The ones from our wedding day. The ones showing the affair had never stopped, not for a single moment. This isn't about one mistake, Sharon said, her voice calm and clear. This is about a pattern of deception that lasted the entire marriage. Mr. Richardson didn't just cheat on his wife, he stole from her. He used marital funds to finance an affair while Ms. Morgan worked and paid the bills and believed she was building a future with her partner. The judge reviewed everything with a neutral expression, asking occasional questions. When she finished, she looked directly at Grant. Mr. Richardson, do you have anything to say in your defense? Grant glanced at Paul, who gave a small shake of his head. There was nothing to say. The evidence spoke for itself. The judge ruled in my favor on nearly every point. I would keep the apartment. Grant would reimburse me for the documented diverted funds, over $14,000. He would receive nothing from my retirement accounts, which Paul had tried to claim a share of. As we left the courtroom, Grant caught up to me in the hallway. I hope you're happy, he said, his voice bitter. You've completely ruined my life. I stopped and turned to face him. For 3 years, his voice had made me anxious, desperate to smooth things over and avoid conflict. Now it just sounded pathetic. You ruined your own life, Grant. I just stopped covering for you. I walked away, feeling his stare on my back. Behind me, I heard Paul murmuring something about appeals, about options. But I knew none of it would matter. The truth was out. The people he'd fooled for years now knew exactly who he was. And I was finally free. I pushed through the courthouse doors and stepped into the March sunlight. The air was cold but clear, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. Sharon caught up to me on the steps. "You did great in there. I didn't really do anything. You told the truth. Sometimes that's the bravest thing you can do." The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. Grant paid the court-ordered reimbursement, though Paul complained about it every step of the way. Last I heard through the grapevine, Vanessa had ended things with him shortly after the hearing. Apparently, the affair lost its appeal once it wasn't a secret anymore. Grant moved to a smaller apartment on the other side of the city. His family still spoke to him, but things were different. The golden boy image had cracked, and everyone could see what was underneath. I didn't feel satisfied about his struggles. I didn't feel much of anything toward him anymore. He was just a stranger who'd once occupied space in my life, and now he didn't. What surprised me most was how much energy I had now that I wasn't constantly managing his moods, his lies, his version of reality. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I stood in my apartment now, legally and completely mine, and looked around at how much had changed. I'd repainted the bedroom a warm coral color that Grant had always hated. "Too bright," he'd said whenever I'd suggested it. Now it was my favorite room in the place. I'd rearranged all the furniture, hung new art I'd found at a local gallery, filled the space with things that brought me joy instead of compromise. The apartment that had once felt like a prison now felt like home. Grant had paid the full reimbursement 2 months ago, though his attorney had dragged it out as long as legally possible. I'd used some of that money to buy new furniture, a couch I'd picked out myself, a dining table that actually fit the space, a bed that was mine and nobody else's. The rest I'd put into savings. For the future. For me. I'd started therapy to process everything I'd been through. My therapist, Dr. Kim, was helping me understand how I'd lost myself in the marriage, how I'd shrunk and accommodated and apologized for taking up space. "You spent 3 years trying to be smaller so he could be bigger," she'd said during one session. "Now you get to figure out who you are when you're not making yourself small." I'd reconnected with friends I'd let drift away during the marriage. My college roommate Nina, who I hadn't talked to in over a year. My work friend Sophie, who'd kept inviting me to happy hours I'd always declined because Grant had wanted me home. They'd both noticed how different I seemed now. Lighter somehow. More present. I'd even started painting again. Nothing serious, just watercolors in a sketchbook I kept on my kitchen table. Grant had always said it was a waste of time, that I should focus on more practical hobbies. Now I painted whenever I felt like it, just because it made me happy. My mom had noticed the change immediately during my last visit. "There you are," she'd said, tears in her eyes. "There's my girl. I was worried I'd lost her forever." I'd cried too. Not from sadness, but from relief. From the realization that I was still here, still me, just buried under 3 years of trying to be someone I wasn't. Now, standing in my apartment on a Saturday morning, I thought about everything I'd lost. 3 years of my life. My belief in a future that had never existed. My trust in my own judgment. But I'd gained something too. I'd learned that I was stronger than I'd ever known. That I could survive betrayal and come out the other side. That my worth wasn't determined by whether someone chose me, it was determined by whether I chose myself. My phone buzzed. For a second, my stomach clenched with old anxiety. But it was just Nina, asking if I wanted to grab brunch. I typed back, "Yes. I'll meet you there in an hour." I opened the windows and let the September breeze flow through the apartment. Outside, the city hummed with life. People going about their Saturdays, living their lives, making their choices. I was 29 years old, starting over, figuring out who I was when I wasn't trying to save a marriage that had never really existed. And for the first time in years, I felt excited about what came next. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't waiting for permission to take up space or speak my mind or want more than I was given. I wasn't making myself smaller to accommodate someone else's lies. I was just me. Marin. Whole and imperfect and free. I grabbed my jacket and keys, ready to meet Nina for brunch, ready for whatever this new chapter held. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own uncertainties. But today, right now, I was exactly where I needed to be. And that was enough.